slipped on the back steps on a Wednesday morning in November, and the sound my ankle made when it hit the patio stones was something I'll never forget. Not loud, just a quiet, wet snap, like a branch giving way under ice. I knew immediately it wasn't a sprain. I'd been a home care nurse for 31 years. I knew what bones sounded like when they broke. My phone was inside on the kitchen counter. I'd only stepped out to shake the birdseed onto the feeder before the snow started. I was in my housecoat and slippers. I sat there on the cold concrete for what felt like a very long time, my right leg bent wrong beneath me, the November air cutting right through the flannel, while the chickadees came anyway and ate the seed I'd spilled when I fell. My neighbor Agnes finally saw me through her kitchen window. She came running across the yard, still holding a dish towel, called 911, held my hand until the paramedics arrived. At the hospital, they told me I had a displaced fracture of the fibula and a hairline crack in the tibia. Surgery. General anesthetic. A metal plate and 7 screws. The nurses asked who to call. I gave them my daughter's number, and then my son-in-law's. They tried both while I was in pre-op. My daughter's phone rang through to voicemail. My son-in-law's did the same. The surgical coordinator left messages on both numbers. The attending nurse called twice more before they wheeled me through the OR doors. The last thing I said before the anesthesia took me was, "Did anyone reach my daughter?" The nurse's face told me everything before her words did. When I came out of surgery, it was evening. The room was dim and smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. My leg was elevated, racked and throbbing. I turned my head expecting to see her, hoping for her, the way you hope for things even when part of you already knows. The person in the chair beside my bed was not my daughter. It was a woman named Winona Baptiste, who I had not seen in person in almost 3 years. She was asleep, sitting upright, her coat folded across her lap, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked like she'd been there for hours. Because she had, she woke up the moment I shifted. Her eyes went from groggy to alert in about 2 seconds. "You're awake. Oh, thank God." She leaned forward and took both my hands in hers. "You gave us a scare. How did you—" My voice was barely there, scraped raw from the intubation. She held a cup of water to my lips. "Agnes called me. She found my number in your address book. I got here about 2 hours after your surgery. I'd met Winona when she was 18, and I was her home care nurse, assigned to her mother during a long illness. I wasn't supposed to get attached. But this girl had been doing her mother's laundry, cooking the meals, managing the medications, going to school full-time, and never once asking anyone to notice how much she was carrying. Something about that reminded me of myself at that age. I started staying a little longer than I had to, helping with things that weren't technically in my job description. After her mother passed, I kept in touch. Cards at first, then calls. I went to her college convocation. I was there when she opened her bookkeeping business 6 years ago. She cried, and I pretended not to notice. "My daughter," I said. Something moved across Winona's face, a careful stillness. "The hospital's been trying. Her voicemail is full now. They've also called your son-in-law. No answer." I closed my eyes. "There's something I need to show you," Winona said. "I didn't want to do this right now, but I think you need to see it before you hear it from someone else." She held out her phone. My daughter's Instagram. Public. Because my daughter had always loved an audience. The most recent post was from that afternoon. She and her husband at a resort in Whistler, British Columbia. Him in a ski jacket holding 2 poles, her in an expensive white parka, the mountain enormous and blue behind them. Both grinning. The caption read, "Long weekend unplugged. No Wi-Fi, no work, just the mountains. Needed this so badly." Posted 4 hours after I hit the patio stones. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then Winona scrolled down without me asking. More photos. My daughter and her husband at dinner the night before. Candles on the table, wine glasses catching the light. The night before that, a hot tub photo with the caption, "Self-care isn't selfish." Each one time-stamped over the 48 hours I'd been lying in a hospital bed. They had cell service. They had Wi-Fi. They were posting twice a day. "No Wi-Fi," I said aloud. I read the caption again to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. No Wi-Fi, no work. Winona took the phone back gently. I closed my eyes again, but the photos were still there behind my eyelids. When had I become something to escape? Lying there in that hospital bed, the morphine wearing off and the plate in my leg beginning to make itself known, I couldn't stop the memories from coming. They arrived like water, finding cracks, filling in all the spaces I'd spent years carefully papering over. It had started, I think, after my husband passed. 4 years ago now. We'd been married 42 years. He went quickly, a heart attack in February, shoveling the driveway because he never could bring himself to hire someone for it, no matter how many times I asked. My daughter flew in from Vancouver for the funeral. She stayed 5 days. Her husband stayed 3. They were kind during those 5 days. Genuinely kind. And then they left, and the kindness seemed to leave with them. I handled the estate alone. The lawyers, the paperwork, the Canada pension survivor applications, the bank accounts, the insurance policies. I sorted through 42 years of my husband's belongings by myself over the course of 2 months. His workshop tools, his coin collection, the flannel shirts he always wore on Saturday mornings that still smelled like him until they didn't anymore. I called my daughter during that time. More than once I caught her crying. Her advice was always practical. Have you thought about joining a grief group, Mum? They do them at the community centre. Or, you should really talk to someone professional about this. I was talking to someone professional. I was talking to her. The grandchildren were 7 and 9 when their grandfather died. I offered to take them after school so my daughter and her husband could have some breathing room. We've got it handled, Mum. Don't worry. I asked about school concerts. It's really just for parents. There aren't enough seats. I sent birthday presents. The thank you calls stopped coming around the second year. The holidays contracted the way daylight does in November, gradually and then all at once. First Christmas after their grandfather passed, my daughter came for 3 days. The year after that, 2 days. And they left early because the kids had hockey. Last Christmas they called from the airport on their way to her husband's family in Prince Edward Island. I spent Christmas dinner with Agnes from next door, who is 79 and makes the best butter tarts I've ever eaten, and who didn't once make me feel like a burden for being there. The phone calls got shorter, then rarer. Then I noticed I was always the one initiating them. Every single time. I started keeping track, not because I wanted to, but because part of me needed to know if I was imagining it. I wasn't. 7 weeks. That was the longest gap. 7 weeks without my daughter calling me first. About 5 months ago, she did call unexpectedly. My heart actually jumped when I saw her name on the screen. Hi, Mum, quick question. Do you know offhand what the assessed value on the house is? Not how are you? Not I've been thinking about you. Property value. Why do you ask? Just curious. Kevin was looking at the market in your area. Did you know the Hendersons on your street sold for almost $850? That seems high, but apparently the whole neighborhood's gone up. I didn't know where she was going with it. I understand now. That old place is probably worth more than you'd think, she continued. Have you thought at all about what makes sense long term? It's a lot of house for one person. It's my home, I said. Of course. Just thinking out loud. She changed the subject. But I kept thinking about it afterward, turning it over. I told myself I was being uncharitable. Mothers shouldn't be uncharitable about their own children. I was very uncharitable. Winona stayed at the hospital 4 days. She slept in that chair the first night, went home to get a proper sleep the second, and was back by 7 the next morning with a thermos of proper coffee and a container of her mother's bannock recipe that she'd made from memory. She helped me with the things the nurses were too busy to help with. She read to me in the evenings from a novel she'd had in her bag. She made me laugh twice, which hurt, and was worth it both times. On the third day, I had 2 visitors who changed everything. Agnes came first, bringing a tin of shortbread and sitting in the chair like she'd been there 100 times before, which she nearly had by that point. We talked about the neighborhood, about my recovery, about her granddaughter's new baby. Then she paused and set down the shortbread tin. I need to tell you something, she said, and I've been going back and forth about whether I should, but I think I should. Go ahead. About 6 weeks ago, I got a call from your son-in-law. We've barely spoken since your husband's funeral. He was very pleasant, very chatty. Asked how I was doing, how the neighborhood was, how you were doing. She looked at me carefully. Then he started asking very specific questions, whether I'd noticed you seeming forgetful, whether you'd mentioned any confusion, whether I'd ever seen you leave the stove on or seem disoriented on your walks, whether I thought you were managing all right on your own. The room felt colder than it had a moment before. What did you tell him? I told him you were sharper than I was and probably sharper than he was, and that you'd helped me fill out my disability tax credit forms last spring because I couldn't figure them out. He thanked me very politely and then he asked one more thing. She paused. He asked if you'd had any falls lately. What did you say? I said no, because you hadn't. Not yet. She met my eyes. But it stuck with me. Why was he asking? And then you fell, and neither he nor your daughter came, and I started putting things together. Agnes left an hour later. 50 minutes after that, my friend Colette from my old nursing unit stopped by, flowers in one hand and a Tim Hortons bag in the other, filling the room with her laugh the way she always did. We talked for a while, then she grew serious. Something's been sitting with me since I heard you were in hospital, she said. I got a strange call about 2 months back. From your daughter. My chest went tight. She introduced herself very nicely, asked how I was, how long we'd worked together, how close we were, and then Colette set down her coffee. She asked whether I'd ever had concerns about your memory, your capacity, whether I'd noticed any changes in you, any signs that you might not be coping well on your own. What did you say? I said you ran the volunteer schedule at the hospice unit better than the paid coordinator, and that I'd trust your clinical judgment over most of the nurses I'd worked with. She thanked me and asked if I'd be willing to put that in writing. Colette's expression was flat. I said I'd be willing to put in writing that she had a lot of nerve. 2 calls, 2 different people. The same questions, the same pattern, the same careful language about cognitive decline and independent living. After Colette left, Winona was quiet for a moment. Then she said, when I went to your house to get your things, I found something on the kitchen table. An envelope. Opened, but sitting right there. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded pamphlet, glossy. A photograph of seniors doing seated yoga in a sunlit room. Cedar View Memory and Complex Care, Kelowna, British Columbia. Inside was a brochure, and tucked inside the brochure was a pre-filled inquiry form. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Patient name, my name, age, 71. Checkboxes marked. Cognitive decline suspected. History of falls, difficulty managing independently. Family-initiated assessment requested. Every box ticked. Every single one a lie. The financial information section asked about my property, my RRSP and TFSA balances, my pension income, my life insurance policies. At the bottom, the family contact name, my daughter's name, my son-in-law's name, her phone number, her handwriting. The postmark on the envelope was dated 9 days before my fall. I held the paper for a long time without speaking. She's been building toward this, Winona said quietly. For months, maybe longer. The pieces came together the way ice does in spring, slowly and then all at once. And once it's moving, you understand that it was already moving long before you noticed. The questions about property values, the calls to my friends, building a paper trail of decline that didn't exist, the inquiry form arriving before any fall had even occurred. This wasn't concern, it was preparation. Get me assessed, get me placed, sell the house, access the estate while I was still alive and couldn't fight back easily. And when I fell and broke my leg, they didn't come because they didn't need to. A hospitalized 71-year-old woman with a fracture and a surgery on record was exactly the kind of documentation they needed. Why rush home? The medical file was doing the work while they sipped wine in Whistler. They hadn't counted on Agnes, or Colette, or Winona, sleeping in a hospital chair because she still hadn't forgotten what it felt like when someone stayed. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Her name is Janet Osei, and she handled my husband's estate, and she is not a woman who wastes words. I explained the situation. She was quiet for 3 seconds, and then she said, "Can you come in next week?" "I can come in Tuesday." "Tuesday it is. Bring everything." I arrived at Janet's office in downtown Victoria on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after my surgery. I wore the burgundy blazer my husband had given me for our 35th anniversary because he said it made me look like I meant business. He was right. Janet had everything prepared: a new will, a family trust for my grandchildren, managed by Janet as trustee, structured so that neither my daughter nor my son-in-law could access or direct the funds until the children reached the age of 25. A bequest for Winona, charitable gifts to the palliative care unit at the hospital where I'd spent most of my career, to the food bank where I'd volunteered for 11 years, and to the Indigenous Youth Literacy program that Agnes's granddaughter ran out of the community centre. My daughter and her husband would receive nothing. This is irrevocable once signed, Janet said. You understand that fully. I understood it the way you understand things that have been true for a long time before you let yourself see them. Then Janet said, there's one more thing I'd strongly recommend: a formal cognitive assessment on record. If this is challenged, and given what you've described it may well be, we want documentation that you are entirely of sound mind. I took the assessment that same afternoon at a clinic 2 blocks from Janet's office. The neuropsychologist was a quietly meticulous man named Dr. Gunn, who asked me to remember 5 words, repeat sequences, describe shapes, explain proverbs, calculate backwards from 100 by sevens. I'd administered versions of these tests myself during my nursing years. I passed without a single flag across every domain. Dr. Yee's written assessment described my cognition as sharply intact and noted no indicators of any decline whatsoever. Janet attached the signed report to the will. My daughter called 19 days after my fall. Her voice was pitched at a frequency I recognized from childhood, the one she used when she'd broken something and needed me not to be angry about it. Mum, oh my God, I just saw all these messages. What happened? Are you all right? I broke my leg. Surgery. 7 screws and a plate. I can't believe we were completely off the grid. The resort had almost no signal at all. If I had known. You posted 11 times in 2 days. Silence. That was mostly Kevin. He had the app logged in on his phone. I barely touched mine. You're in every photograph. A pause. Then smoothly, Mum, I'm so sorry. I'm coming out as soon as I can. I'll book a flight this week. Come Saturday. Come for lunch. She arrived Saturday with my son-in-law and without my grandchildren. They had skating, she explained at the door. The rink schedules are impossible this time of year. They stayed 2 hours. My son-in-law admired the house 3 times, mentioning once that comparable properties in the neighborhood had gone for close to 900,000, and once that it must be a lot to maintain in winter, and once that they'd been thinking it might make sense for me to be closer to them. Whenever you're ready for that. No pressure, just something to think about. My daughter asked about my leg in the way you ask about something you already know the answer to. Then I mentioned, as casually as I could manage, that Janet was updating my estate documents following the health scare, and that they were welcome to come along to the meeting on Thursday. The look that passed between my daughter and her husband lasted less than 2 seconds. It was the look of people who have been waiting for a particular door to open. Of course, my daughter said. Whatever you need, Mum. They left at 1:30. Before their car had reached the end of the block, I could see my daughter on her phone. Thursday arrived. Janet's boardroom smelled of coffee and old wood. Winona sat beside me. Janet sat across from us, documents arranged in a neat row. My daughter and her husband arrived at exactly the agreed time, dressed as though they'd come from a business meeting, which I suppose, in their minds, they had. They stopped when they saw Winona. Why is she here? My son-in-law's voice was pleasant, but only on the surface. Winona is here because I asked her to be, I said. Sit down. This is a private family matter, my daughter said. Winona is family, more than you have been in 4 years. Please sit down. They sat. The room felt like a held breath. Before Janet could speak, I opened the folder I'd brought and slid the Cedarview inquiry form across the table. My daughter's face went the color of old paper. I found this in my house, I said. Your handwriting, your phone number, your signature on the contact line, postmarked 9 days before I fell. I was being proactive, she said after a moment. You're alone in a big house. I was thinking ahead. You checked the box for cognitive decline. I was filling it in hypothetically. You checked history of falls. I hadn't had a single fall in my life. Mum, you called Agnes. You asked whether I seemed confused, forgetful, whether I left the stove on, whether I was managing. You called Colette at the hospice unit. Same questions. You were building a case. I kept my voice even, steady. I'd had 3 weeks to rehearse this, and when the moment came, I didn't need the rehearsal at all. You were going to have me assessed, have me placed in that facility in Kelowna, and sell this house. My son-in-law started to speak. I held up my hand. When your father died, you stayed 5 days. 5 days, and then you were gone. I sorted through 42 years of his belongings alone. I handled every piece of paperwork alone. I spent months in that house alone, grieving alone, calling you and being told to join a grief group. I made excuses for you. You were busy. You had the kids. Life doesn't stop. I paused. And then you broke my leg. Not literally, I know, but everything that followed, and when it happened, you were in Whistler, posting. 11 times in 2 days. I looked at my daughter directly. You didn't answer because you didn't want to come back, because coming back meant I was real to you, and I was easier when I wasn't. My daughter's eyes were wet. I didn't stop. I spent 2 days in surgery and recovery before Winona arrived. Agnes, my 79-year-old neighbor, called 911. Winona slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights. Colette drove an hour each way to bring me flowers and coffee. The people who showed up had no obligation to. The person who had every obligation was posting sunset photos and calling it unplugged. Janet opened the folder. She read the bequests clearly and without inflection. To my grandchildren, a trust of $140,000 for education and development, managed by Janet Osei as trustee until each child reached 25. Neither parent to have access, authority, or oversight. To Winona Baptiste, $70,000 in recognition of exceptional loyalty and love. To the palliative care unit at my hospital, $60,000. To the food bank, $50,000. To the Indigenous Youth Literacy Program, $30,000. Remaining liquid assets retained by me for my own care and living. The house, in a separate instrument Janet produced, had been transferred into a living trust the previous week. My daughter and her husband were not beneficiaries of the trust. It would pass upon my death to the literacy program and the food bank in equal shares. My son-in-law said very quietly, "The house alone is worth." "I know what it's worth," I said. My daughter's composure broke. "You've let her manipulate you." She pointed at Winona. "You barely know her. She's not family. She's been filling your head with—" She slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights. My voice didn't waver. "What did you do?" Silence. Janet slid a document across the table. "Mrs. Breen, Palmer underwent a comprehensive neuropsychological assessment 11 days ago, administered by Dr. Raymond Yee, registered neuropsychologist. Full cognitive battery. No flags across any domain. The assessment is signed, dated, and attached to both instruments. Should either of you wish to contest, you're welcome to try. You will not succeed, and you will spend a great deal of money learning that." My son-in-law stood first. My daughter followed. At the door, she turned back, and for a moment she looked exactly like the child she had been before whatever this was had taken over. "You're going to regret this," she said, "when you're really old, when you actually need help. You'll wish you'd kept us close." I looked at her for a long time before I answered. I needed help in November. I was on the patio in my housecoat, in the cold, with a broken leg. I was there for 45 minutes before Agnes saw me through her kitchen window. I was in surgery alone. I woke up alone. The people who came were Agnes and Colette and Winona. You were in a hot tub posting about self-care. I picked up my copy of the documents. I've been without you for years. The only difference now is I've stopped pretending I wasn't. The door clicked shut behind them. Winona didn't say anything for a while. Neither did I. Janet quietly refilled the coffee. The weeks after were not easy. I won't tell you they were. There were mornings I woke up and reached for my phone out of habit, wanting to call my daughter the way I had for 30 years before I remembered what she had done and who she had turned out to be. Those two things can be true at once, that you grieve a person and that you are done being harmed by them. It took me a while to stop treating those as contradictions. I sold the house in March. The market was strong and it moved quickly. I found a condominium closer to the water, 2 bedrooms, a balcony where I can watch the ferries cross in the morning, a building with an elevator and a good management company that actually fixes things when they break. Moving out of the house was the hardest day I've had since my husband died. 42 years of our life together packed into cardboard boxes. His reading chair went to the thrift shop. His tools went to Agnes's son. The kitchen table, the one where my daughter did her homework, and my husband proposed to me on a Tuesday night over shepherd's pie that had somehow burned on the bottom, I gave to Winona. She protested. "Are you sure?" she said, running her hand along the edge. "He would have wanted it to go to someone who'd actually use it," I said. "I walk every morning now, a different route than I used to take, along the waterfront instead of through my old neighborhood. My leg is healed. I barely notice it unless the weather's turning. Winona comes for dinner most Sundays. Colette and I have started a monthly lunch. Agnes and I text more than I text anyone else, which would have seemed very strange to me 5 years ago, and now seems entirely right. My grandchildren came to visit in April. Winona brought them because she had quietly built a relationship with them over the months when I hadn't known how to. And one Saturday she called to ask if I felt up to having 2 visitors aged 8 and 10. I said yes before she'd finished the sentence. We made butter tarts from my husband's mother's recipe, which they ate at the kitchen table while doing an enormous puzzle of British Columbia wildlife. My grandson told me about the book he was reading. My granddaughter showed me a song she'd learned on the recorder, all the way through, twice. Before they left, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. A drawing. 2 figures, one small, one taller. A blue sky full of careful birds, in handwriting that was still learning itself, at the bottom for Grandma. "I missed you." I put it on the refrigerator beside a photo of my husband and me on our 25th anniversary, standing outside a lodge in Banff, squinting into the sun and laughing about something neither of us could probably remember an hour later. Whether my daughter knows about the visits, I don't ask. Winona handles the logistics. I trust her. I've trusted her for 23 years and she has never once given me reason not to. In June, I am flying to Cape Breton. My husband and I talked about it for decades and never went. I have a week booked at an inn near the Cabot Trail, a rental car reserved, and a list of places he had circled in an old travel magazine I found in the back of his desk when I was clearing out his things. I've kept that magazine for 4 years. I'm finally going to use it. People ask me sometimes. My friend Colette asks most directly because she is that kind of friend, whether I regret cutting my daughter off. Whether I regret the will, the house, all of it. The honest answer is that regret isn't quite the right word. I grieve. I grieve the mother-daughter relationship I thought I had, and the one I wanted, and the one I kept reconstructing in my head long after it had become something else entirely. That grief doesn't disappear because you made the right decision. You can make the right decision and still mourn what it cost you. Both things are true at the same time. My pastor, an unhurried woman named Reverend Shaw, who has been counseling people through hard things for 30 years, said something to me in February that I thought about almost every day since. She said, "You're not mourning your daughter. You're mourning the version of her you needed to believe in. The real one showed you who she was, over and over for years. You just finally let yourself see it." She was right. My daughter showed me who she was when her father died, and she stayed 5 days. She showed me when she called to ask about property values instead of asking how I was sleeping. She showed me when she checked the box for cognitive decline on a form before I'd had a single fall. And she showed me when she posted sunset photos from a ski resort while I lay in surgery, alone, 1,000 kilometers away. I believed her version of things for a very long time. Here is what I know now, at 71, with a healed leg and a condo near the water and a kitchen table that has Winona's coffee rings on it, because she is not always careful with her mug, and I have decided that is entirely fine. Family is not who shares your last name or your blood type or your holiday plans. Family is who Agnes was when she saw me through her kitchen window and ran across the yard still holding a dish towel. Family is who Winona was when she slept upright in the hospital chair for 3 nights because someone needed her to be there. Family is who Colette was when she drove 2 hours round trip to bring me flowers and tell me I was still the sharpest person she'd ever worked beside. I spent 31 years of my nursing career being the person who stayed, the one who sat with people in the difficult hours, who came back when it would have been easier not to. I gave that to patients and colleagues and neighbors and strangers, and to my daughter lavishly for 30 years. When I finally needed someone to stay for me, the people who came were the ones I had helped without keeping score. You teach people how to treat you. I taught my daughter that I would always be there, that I would make excuses, that I would swallow the hurt and call it something else. When I finally changed the terms, she didn't like it. That is not my problem to carry anymore. If you're listening to this and something in it sounds familiar, I want you to hear me clearly. It is not too late. It is not too late to stop accepting the version of yourself that other people find convenient. It is not too late to look around and see who has actually been showing up, quietly, without drama, without an agenda, and to let them in. I'm 71. I have a condo I love, a balcony where I drink my coffee in the mornings watching the ferries, a granddaughter who draws careful birds, a friend who brings bannock, a neighbour who runs across yards in November, and a flight booked to Cape Breton. For the first time in 4 years, when I wake up in the morning, I'm not dreading the day. I'm looking forward to it.